So that's just in the math and the sciences. Within the other areas, and you saw some high points and some low points, but again, we're looking at, we had an increase in the number of AP students and the number of AP exams. Both teachers and supervisors are reviewing the instructional reports. The collaboration between teachers is taking place and scheduled to take place throughout the course of the year. We have a very robust professional development program that's very supportive, and we look to help teachers gain professional development for teaching in the AP program. And also some of the areas, and I'll showcase just a little bit with the world languages, the integration of complementary programs. So if you're aware of the Seal of Biliteracy program, that's a program that it's a federal program that the state has signed on to, where our students can be recognized with a Seal of Biliteracy for scoring at a specific level on a world language proficiency assessment. We brought that in a couple of years ago. And I think this might be the second or third year of testing that we're going to be going through with that. But with that assessment also brings a greater knowledge of how students are being assessed for that, and that only can help in the progression. Also, in the world languages, they've revised their whole curriculum so that, and this goes back several years ago, but they've revised their curriculum so that it focuses in on not AP level work, but the themes behind AP, right? So students are familiar with these topics as they go through the world language curriculum. So a couple of just examples of how those types of things and curriculum review can contribute to this. And as we look forward to the spring of 2022, again, doing those things, putting plans in motion to help prepare our students, but it would be also, I know the teachers are looking forward to going into this year and this year's administration and seeing the improvements that can come out of last year, because a lot of people worked very hard last year, and as we move into this year, we're hoping that as we go through a more normal school year, that our students will do well on the exams. So let's talk a little bit about SAT and ACT. These results all come from the New Jersey Annual Performance Reports, which are available online. A couple things, again, to keep in mind. As you know, this has been a point of discussion at some board meetings this time last year. There were national administrations of the SAT and ACT were canceled, and these cancellations may affect the participation rates of the students. Even the State Department of Ed on their website on our performance report states that you recommend caution when you compare results. The majority of colleges and universities are test optional. I just met with our guidance supervisors who ran a college board evening a couple weeks ago, and again, that was one of the messages that came out of that. But an important part of the student application process is the strength of the curriculum and the coursework that the student engages in throughout their time in high school. Students are getting into highly competitive colleges and universities, and as you take a look at the data for SAT, these are data points that reflect seniors in the class, but it could include data points or SAT tests, for example, that students took any time in their past history. So let's dive into these results. And first up is the participation rates. I always find this interesting. If you're always wondering what to take, whether it's the SAT or the ACT, the annual performance reports includes the percentage of students in the district that take the SAT and what percent take the ACT, and then you can see the state average in there as well. One of the things that's interesting is always you take a look at the ACT and the state average versus the district average, and we have a lot of students that are taking the ACT. So for comparisons, for internal comparisons, we take a look at these school scores for the reading and writing, as well as the math. And this is just this was a group of schools that we've been comparing ourselves to for some time, probably back since 2008. You're going to see that data in a minute. And let me go to that. So when we previewed this presentation last week, one of the things that came up was taking a look at the data to see how we're doing in comparison to the school that scored the highest, which would be in blue, the top blue line, the school that scored the lowest, which would be the bottom yellow line, the DFG minimum, the average, which is the red line that goes through the middle, and then you've got the bright green and the bright blue line that are just below or right around the red lines, and those represent Ramapo for green, and Indian Hills for blue. And when you take a look at that, you can say, over time, again, this goes back to 2008, 2009 to 2019, 2020, you can see how that data trended. You can see that bump in the 15, 16, 16, 17 school year. And that's when, in March of 2014, the College Board announced a change to the SAT that was going to go into effect in March of 2016, or in the 2016 school year. That happened in March. And then you can see the last 3 years, 17, 18, 19, how our scores took a dip, but things kind of leveled off. Even that top blue line took a little bit of a dip. And I speculate that that's probably due to that change in that assessment at that time and what the students were taking. Now, you can take a look at this and say, you know what, Mr. Sutherland, you need to zoom in. I've got that. So there's our graph zoomed in. And this is 5-year trend data, right? And it's important to look at this because, and when you look at this, to make sure you take a look at the y-axis graph, okay? Because the differences are there. You can see that there's a huge difference between the red line and the blue line. But when you take a look at that, you can see how many points, or approximate how many points that was. And you can see, again, the green line, the blue line for Ramapo and Indian Hills, respectively. For math, same thing. You can see that trend over time from 2008-9 to 2019-20. And then as we go into more of the deeper dive with the 5-year trend data, you can see how the two schools, the green line and the bright blue line, compare to the high school, the low school, and then the average. And then with the SAT, the SAT also has benchmarks, and the benchmark of a 480 in math or a 530 in reading and writing. And what these benchmarks represent are the likelihood of a student getting a C or better in a first semester college course when they go off to college. So, and again, looking at the district data, you can see over time that 2016-17 year that had that high blip on the graphs, those numbers are higher than they are when you start looking at the next 3 years, the 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, right? And you can see how the students are performing within the benchmarks and meeting the benchmarks for the SAT. Now for the ACT, I don't have similar graphs for the ACT. There's a lot of data with the ACT. There's actually 4 tests that the students take. They take reading, English, math, and science, and then there's also a composite score. And over time, our averages for those 4 tests generally stay about the same between the 2 buildings. But what I do like to take a look at is just the benchmarks to see what are the percentage of students that are meeting the benchmarks. And again, for these benchmarks of 18, 22, 22, and 23, if students are achieving those, it's the likelihood of a student scoring a B, 50% chance of a student scoring a B or higher, or a 75% chance of a student scoring a C or higher in that comparable first-year course in college. A lot of numbers on that slide. So where does that leave us with the SAT and ACT? Unlike the APs, we don't have SAT and ACT classes here in the district. But what we do provide is, I know like in the last couple of years, we have a service called Albert.io, which are used in the classes, but also has modules to help students prepare for the SAT and ACT. They provide practice questions that students can sign up for and go through. And I also know that there's additional support through the APTS and PTSO between the 2 buildings. So finally, Start Strong assessments. These assessments were just administered. If you remember, we had delayed openings on the last 2 days of September and October 1st, and those were to administer the Start Strong assessments. The Start Strong assessments, and this was just to clarify this information, students coming into Algebra 1, and they're sitting in an Algebra 1 class here in the high school, they took a Start Strong assessment. And the question that often came up was, how is my student or how is my child going to perform on an Algebra 1 test when they just started Algebra 1? But in reality, the Algebra 1 Start Strong test was based on 8th grade math standards around the algebraic concepts that would be pertinent for Algebra 1. So those standards really help to inform the readiness level of the students in Algebra 1 and identify what sort of learning strengths as well as gaps that they may have as they move forward. And that was true within Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2, and then English 9 and English 10. Science 9 was based on the science standards from middle school, and then the Science 12 exam was based on the science standards from the high school years. There are 3 levels. There's basically three outcomes from this exam. The students will either be identified as needing less support, some support, or strong support that may be needed, okay? There's nothing up here that says, hey, Mr. Sutherland, your son is doing fine. He doesn't need any support. It says less support, some support, strong support. Okay, so those are the 3 types of feedback that you're going to see holistically about how your child performed on the Start Strong assessments. Currently, we've been able to, and I know this was one of the parts about the exam, was that the results are immediately available. The classroom teachers currently have access to how their students did on the Start Strong assessments. They've been shared with them, with the idea of going through those results to identify, again, student strengths and learning gaps in what students are coming into class with. We get the results back so we can see results by question and also student performance item level reports to really get a detailed look as to how each individual student did. There's also a connection of the question to the evidence statements and the standards. So we can reflect back on the standards, granted they're the year before, but then we can use that information to provide, say, do nows at the start of the class, or just quick review types of activities to get students ready for an upcoming concept that might rely on these 8th grade or 7th grade topics. So when are you going to get the results as parents? The end of the testing window is actually this past Friday, October 22nd. We are looking to provide parents with the access to the test name and the level of support that the student needs, that's identified on the reports, by this Friday. That we're going to put into the parent portal of Genesis, and we'll publish an announcement when those go out. Again, this is good. This presentation is going to go up online tomorrow, so if you want more information, you can click on the link that says Start Strong Resources and Score Interpretation Guides. The state will be sending us the individual student reports by December 14th, and those are actual paper copies. When those come in, we turnkey those around and we send those out to the parents. The parents will also have access to video student reports, individual student reports, where you can log in with your son or daughter's credentials. It will be on the scoring sheet, and you can go in and take a look at, and they actually walk you through a video of the results themselves. Has anyone ever done that by any chance? In the past, last year or a couple years ago, they piloted it. It's kind of an interesting thing. If you get the results, I encourage you to take a look at those. And finally, just like we did here tonight for the DLM and for the Access for Ls, Start Strong was part of the state testing program. So we will have to do a public reporting of results within 60 days of receiving those ISRs. So within 60 days of December 14th, we're going to wind up talking about Start Strong results. For additional information, you can take a look at the district assessment schedule and information. Our schedule has every assessment on it that students will take throughout the course of the year as part of being here in the school district. You could also look at the New Jersey Assessment webpage for more information. And I would highly encourage you, if you have students that are in the classes of 2023 to 2025, I would highly encourage you to take a look at the high school graduation assessment requirements. If you haven't already, they have changed, and we will be sending out more information about that in the next couple of months, but I would highly recommend if you have a couple minutes to take a look through that document. So with that, that brings us to the conclusion of this test score presentation, and if there's any questions.